Okay, imagine with me that you're sitting by a fire with a cup of joe enjoying a good book. Now, I know we're all college students, so I got a picture to help you think about reading in your free time. You're reading and you ask this question: what does blank mean? Now, blank could be anything. It could be any metaphor, any allusion, any imagery, anything at all. It could be part of the public speaking chapter that you didn't understand and you decided to write about in your 515 connection. But you're asking, what does it mean? This is why hermeneutics are important. Personally, as somebody who feels called to be a pastor, I've thought a lot about what it means in terms of the Bible and other books I've read. And so I'm going to talk to you today about literary hermeneutics. And I know that sounds like an out there term, but once you've heard my speech, you'll know what they are, why you should care about them, and some of who all is using them today. So let's get started with a simple definition. Hermeneutics, simply put, has to do with interpretation. It's a 2,000-year-old word that comes from the Greek word hermenio, meaning to interpret or to explain. Originally used a lot more in terms of interpreting other people's languages or somebody talking. But more specifically, hermeneutics has to do with the process of understanding or the process of interpreting. Friedrich Schleiermacher, a German theologian and philosopher, and arguably one of the greatest influencers on hermeneutical thought, wrote in a journal in 1828 that hermeneutics is generally the art of understanding, particularly a written discourse. So it's more than just straight in and out. It has different approaches to it, and a hermeneutic might be one approach. You can think of it like a skyscraper. If understanding is a skyscraper, there's a lot that goes into building that skyscraper, right? You have to talk to experts, you have to think it through, plan it out, get materials together to do it. And that's how we can think of hermeneutics. There's often not just one correct interpretation, too. Tomasz Kulaga, a professor of literary theory in Katowice, Poland, wrote in 2015 that meaning is potentially infinite, right? So when we interpret something, he says it never lends itself to one all-conclusive meaning, right? It can be deceiving to think that there's only one way to interpret everything or one correct interpretation. But now that you have in mind a little bit about what hermeneutics are, this process, why should you care about them? Well, as college students, we have to read all the time. I know the fact that 75% of you are reading more than 50 pages a week for your classes, and we all know that how we interpret what we read for classes makes or breaks how we do in them, how we take in information and present it. But for fun also, right? If you're reading and you don't get what you're reading, that's not fun. In fact, we think that books we can't understand are dumb or stupid, right? We can't get them. But also, as Christians, hermeneutics are important for helping us understand the Bible, right? The Bible is extremely complex. It has 66 books of unique genres and unique time periods and characters. And if we don't understand the different approaches to interpreting it, how are we going to get something out of it? In fact, the Bible begs so many questions. I mean, what role does theology have to play in the Bible? How do we define what meaning is in the Bible? How do we define what's a helpful or a harmful reading when we go to read the Bible every day? So now that you have a couple reasons for yourselves why hermeneutics actually apply to your lives, why they're important, you can think a little bit about who's using them, right? And today, we're just talking about the Bible. It's obvious that pastors use hermeneutics, right? In fact, most of you said that if you were stuck on a passage, you would turn to a pastor for help. And that's what they're good at. They go to seminary school and get maybe a master's of divinity because that's teaching them to do hermeneutics well. It's teaching them to understand different languages and different time periods extremely well, and that's why we turn to them for help so much. But take a different job. Take lawyers, right? We think lawyers are cool, maybe because of shows like NCIS, but lawyers have to do tons and tons of reading. A study done by the University of Pittsburgh found that lawyers for single clients sometimes have to go through web pages of over 500 documents apiece. So they have to be really good at hermeneutics. Anne Sinsheimer, a professor of legal writing at the University of Pittsburgh, wrote that lawyers are constantly asking text questions. They're trying to make the text meaningful or relevant to themselves by posing questions about how the information could be helpful. So they're constantly using hermeneutics, and every job has to use hermeneutics in some way to meaningfully understand what we read. But now that we've looked at that, now we've looked at where it's being used, what should we consider as we close? You know that hermeneutics is a skill and a process, and we can all get better at it. You get a little bit of why it should matter to you as a college student and as a believer in Christ. And you can imagine how it applies to all these different jobs. So when you think about hermeneutics, I hope you go back and think back to being by the fire and asking that question, what does blank mean? And I hope next time you ask that question, you decide to spend a little more time getting down to the bottom of it.